Okay, so for this particular podcast, my plan is just to give a really brief rundown on how valuable finding synonyms for the key terms in essay topics are. I'm not really very well planned for this one, so you'll have to forgive me if it's a little bit rough. Also, I can't quite tell how the front cam's going to work, so we'll see how that kind of fits in. Okay, so I'm just going to shuffle this so that we have this at background. And I hope that there's some of my faces in frame there. Right, so I've got 3 topics here. I'm specifically going to look at this boy's life when we get to those topics. But I just wanted to say that when I guide students towards writing essays, then the plan that I kind of scaffold them towards or guide them towards is this 6-ish step plan, if you have time to do it properly. And my recommendation is if you're writing a SAC, that you do this for at least 3 pieces before you write your SAC, and by that time you'll be so practiced in doing it that it will become quite easily to you. Also, I wouldn't do some of these steps within the SAC itself. I'll kind of explain as I go through. So if I've got the time, I'm going to do each of these 6 steps as kind of the last one there as well, as thoroughly as I can. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to underline the key terms. That usually takes around about 5 to 10 seconds. Then I'm going to find synonyms for the key terms. I'll get to the value of that in a second. The third thing I'm going to do is I'm going to ask myself some questions about the topic itself. So some areas of exploration that I want to know about before I start my actual thinking. And then I move on to the brainstorm. So the brainstorm is a matter of putting all the evidence, all of the ideas, all of the information that I can on a piece of paper. And if you've got the space, getting that as big as possible is really, really handy, so that you can fill out as much detail as you possibly can. From that brainstorm, I then create a plan. Obviously, topic sentences and then supporting evidence under each of those topic sentences underneath the arguments. The brainstorm is really good for the plan because I can kind of filter out the things that I really like, that I think are the most important and most valuable. Once I've got my plan together, the writing process is easy. And as I tell my students every year, you shouldn't have to think about what you're going to say as you're writing. You should only be thinking about how you're going to say it, because the plan will tell you very generally what you're going to say. Obviously, once you've written it, the best students have time at the end to draft and edit their work. Okay, so today we're going to be focusing on specifically this part of the process, which is finding synonyms. It's one that some students skip, and I would recommend that you don't, because it is actually one of the most valuable parts of the process. The advantage of finding synonyms for the key terms is a bit twofold. The first thing it helps you to do is it helps you to understand the different facets of that key term. So a lot of the time when we're assessing work, we see that students have misunderstood key terms, or that they don't really understand the key terms, and they're just kind of regurgitating those terms, like they're just plonking those terms back on the page without actually demonstrating that they understand them very well. And of course, if you don't demonstrate that you understand a word, that's kind of one of the key skills of studying English, is understanding words. So you need to be able to show that you understand the word, and finding synonyms helps you to do that. The second thing is it helps you to articulate the nuances of the topic. So if all you do is plonk the essay topic verbatim, or even key terms verbatim onto the page, you really haven't shown that you understand the different facets of it. So finding synonyms is a really useful resource that you can go back to and use when you are trying to articulate something else about the essay topic and trying to articulate some kind of nuance about that key term. It also helps you to stop from repeating yourself over and over using the key terms, because you're going to want to do that if you're going to be talking about the topic the whole way through. So finding synonyms is really, really useful. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to very quickly go through the key terms of, we'll see, maybe 2 essay topics. And then I'm going to show you how, as I unpack the synonyms for each of the key terms, that my understanding of that topic develops and changes. So I will look at that first topic. I'm going to grab green. Start here. I'm going to go to that first topic. Woolf's unsparing self-portrait shatters the image of childhood as an innocent time. So immediately I'm kind of thinking, well, sure, it's unsparing. You know, it's, he doesn't spare any kind of detail, so to speak. He doesn't have a great childhood, and sure, there's no innocence. I mean, the innocence is robbed of him because of his conditions. So that's my understanding to start with. Now I'm going to unpack the key terms. So I'm going to grab the green. I'm going to highlight the word unsparing. Self-portrait is important. Yep, I'm going to actually grab that word. It's more important than I just realised. Shatters is a really interesting word. In fact, looking at this, I'm going to have time for one. So, image as well. So I'll just do one, and that will kind of demonstrate what I'm talking about. And childhood and innocent. Alright, so I'm going to start to unpack some of the synonyms here. I'm going to zoom in a little bit more and start to create some synonyms. When I'm thinking about, so there's two things I'm thinking when I'm looking at synonyms. There's only a real temporary benefit to finding synonyms online, like if you go online for a thesaurus or if you've got a book thesaurus. There's only real limited benefit in that. Like, it can be useful to find words that you know are related, but one that you might find a word that you think is related but you don't really know it and you use it improperly. The other benefit of not using thesaurus is that you don't always have to have direct synonyms. So I'm looking at unsparing here. That's an adjective. I'm not necessarily just looking for adjectives. I'm looking for phrases that help me explain what this term means. So I can go and use those phrases again later and I can choose from them. So yeah, there's only really limited benefit in using an external thesaurus. Unless you're finding words that you want, like that you already know already and you're kind of picking from them. I'd recommend that you just go a little bit freeform to start with and go there when you need a bit more extra help. So unsparing, I'm thinking unsparing, how in the text, I'm applying this to the text, how is the text unsparing, or how is the authorial voice unsparing? So if I want a kind of a clarification of this one here, we're really talking about the authorial voice. And we're talking about his narration. Okay, so that's an important clarification. Now, is it unsparing? Does it not spare any detail? As I've said before, maybe not. What do we mean more by unsparing? I think really he doesn't spare specifically some fairly difficult or brutal truths. So if we might talk about the tone itself, I'm going to shift to a different colour pen, a different thickness pen. We're talking about what is unsparing. It's kind of brutal. I like this word brutal here. They're brutal truths. It's extremely honest. It's extremely it's like an unwavering gaze. It's a critical gaze. It's a critical eye. There's a critical eye involved there, in the way that he sees himself. Okay, already I've got a few extra words to help me unpack what I mean by Woolf's unsparing, how it's unsparing. And my understanding of that's developed now a little bit more. When we say self-portrait, obviously what we want to look at there is autobiography. It's definitely not a complete autobiography, which links to this idea of the childhood over here. So it is, well, and we'll get to that in a second as well, because I want to clarify that a little bit more as well. It's a self-portrait. it's interesting, that word portrait. The reason why I came back to this later is portrait has a connotation of a depiction of the self, or a self. And the interesting thing about this self, so to speak, is that we are seeing it be developed in front of our eyes. So we are seeing not only the depiction of the self, but of the development of self. And you might call that into question by kind of saying, well, does he actually do that? Does he develop this at all? I'm kind of shifting between the questions. Maybe it's a bit naughty. Self-portrait, development of self, portrait, depiction, development, maybe illustration. All these words help us to explain. Shatters. Now, shatters, I think this is one of those words that most people would just gloss over. Shatters is a really strong and evocative word. To shatter is to break, and this will help us to decide how we're going to position ourselves in this topic. My screen's being an idiot. Break, to tear down, to destroy, to mar. Shatter is more than mar, though. Like, mar is a weaker version of those things. Alright, so now I actually understand it's not about just kind of being a bit of a crap childhood. It's actually about the destruction of the innocence of childhood. So I'm asking myself now, is the innocence of Toby's childhood destroyed completely? Okay, let's look at image. Well, actually, image. I'm going to look at image in the connection to. I'm going to just link these two. Image and self-portrait work together. The other thing that I'm going to pick up with the word image, though, in terms of a synonym, we've already got an illustration, we've already got a depiction there. Portrait, what was I going to say? There are a lot of visual cues to it. And the visual cues often connect to his costumes. So obviously his facades. Now it's not a direct parallel there, but it is linked conceptually with that idea of the self-image. Look at the visual elements. We've got costumes, facades. A lot of those are deceptions. And I think I'll leave it there. Perhaps illusions. So we're talking there about the illusions of the self, the illusions of that he uses to create himself. Now it's interesting, these two are related in the childhood and innocence. There is I'm going to kind of see if I can go right in here. There is a traditional correlation between a childhood and innocence. That is a traditional correlation, or perhaps an expectation. So what I'm doing there is I'm explaining the relationship between those two things. And when I'm going to find some synonyms for childhood, you know what? It's important. See, if I was to go to a thesaurus and have a look at childhood, I wouldn't necessarily come up with this word, but it is extremely important to the text. We're not just seeing a childhood. In fact, the childhood itself takes up, well, look, if you're generous, probably half the text, whereas the latter half is all about adolescence. So immediately I'm going to distinguish my understanding of the text as not just the childhood. If all I do is talk about his childhood, I've actually missed half the text, and I've failed to actually develop a a more broad and deep understanding of the text as a whole. So I need to talk about the adolescence. What I might do is actually talk about the adolescence and how the childhood, the shattering or the destruction or the marring of his childhood affects his adolescence, and how there's a causal relationship between the two. So I could here talk about the causal relationship. Okay, so what else am I talking about with childhood? I'm talking about, we could talk about pre-adolescence there, or adolescence itself. I'm talking about a time where he is under the care of adults. Not only is he under the care of them, but also under their power and authority. It is a time of dependence. Great. Okay, and lastly we get to this idea of innocence. Is it an innocent time? Well, what do we mean when we say innocence? When we have that nostalgic view, so probably that's something that we need to say. That nostalgic view, that particularly the 1950s childhood was more innocent than perhaps today's. So there is that challenge there to that nostalgic view. When we usually say innocence, we mean something along the lines of not liable or not guilty. And my pen's decided to be an idiot. Excuse me while I just disconnect and connect. I sort of have my pen back. Okay. While this is coming back, so what I'm going to talk about there is not only his lack of guilt. So this idea that children are innocent, they're pure, they're, there's nothing wrong with an innocent, with a baby, as in they're born pure and they're kind of marred by the world. So it shatters that view. But the other view that it challenges is the idea that children are not, cannot do anything that's wrong. So children are kind of, without agency in that regard. They don't have the ability to do the wrong thing mindfully. And I think that that's pretty clear, that when you look at this boy's life, when the narrator talks about the internal psyche of the boy, he's actually attributing to that internal psyche a lot of conniving kind of qualities, and you see that from the outset, where he makes the play for souvenirs right off the bat of the truck crash. Okay, my pen has actually just decided just to be an idiot and not work. Luckily that was at the end rather than at the start, but hopefully I've been able to demonstrate to you that when we look at this issue now, Woolf's unsparing self-portrait shatters the image of childhood as an innocent time. You now have a much better understanding of that topic. You also have a whole bunch of language now with which to articulate your thoughts on it. Hope that's been good.